All right, guys, this one's a very unusual one for this channel, but I'm going to skip the intros and get right into the video. So you can see here, this morning, the Wall Street Journal published an article saying that Donald Trump is bracing for potential charges, and he's actually saying that he expects to be arrested next week. Now, why is this something that's being covered on this channel? Because it looks like Donald Trump is also pushing for people to protest on the streets for this. And there are people on the conservative side who are saying that, look, the Democrats are causing or looking to cause a civil war. And so it's something that if they do cause it, we will win. And, you know, the point that I'm trying to make, at least in this video, is that nobody wants a civil war. Be careful what you guys are potentially calling for. This doesn't end the way that you want it to. And so, you know, could this have an impact on the markets? Absolutely, it could. And so when I first saw this article, and then I saw people calling for, or not necessarily calling for conflict, but saying that if there is conflict, we're going to win. Those are words that really worry me. And, you know, number one, just in terms of like humanity, and like number 10 down the level of importance as an investor, it worries me from the perspective of like, does this mean there could be some real instability in the financial markets that are caused by open conflict between the two sides? So this is very scary. And so I'm going to dive a little bit more into this. So here's what Trump said. You know, he's saying that he expects to be arrested on Tuesday of next week. And then he said, protest, take our nation back. Now, the thing that sort of irked me the wrong way is, one, I don't really like the way Trump talks. In fact, I don't think a lot of Trump's followers even like the way that he talks. But like, I really wish that, you know, if you're going to ask people to protest, just put the word peaceful in front of it and say that like for both sides. I'm not just calling out Trump for that. I'm calling out both sides for that. That like, please let your people know there's nothing wrong with protesting, but just let them know that you're encouraging peaceful protesting, not violent protesting. And so, you know, take our nation back. Okay, fine. And, you know, this part scares me a little bit. And this is why I'm covering it, is because could this lead to the markets reacting from potential open protests and violence? You know, once again, I always say, you know, number one, it worries me from the perspective of like a humanitarian issue, because you don't want excess deaths as a result of violent protests and any of that stuff. And then number two, you know, you don't want it to destabilize the markets in any way. We are already reeling from the bank collapses. We are already going up against a Fed that is continuing to raise rates. Why add political instability and violence and potential for civil conflict in the mix? Like, this is not the time, at least I don't think so. And this is why I got a little bit worried. So Terrence K. Williams, this guy's a prominent guy on the conservative side, and he comes out and says, if they arrest President Trump, then all hell will break loose. We, the people, will rise up, we will protest, and we'll stand with President Trump. And they are trying to start a civil war, but we will win in the end. Look, he's not overtly calling for violence. He's not calling for a civil war, but this "we will win in the end" is essentially telling people to be confident and almost like expect a war because we'd win anyways, you know? And so like, I don't like this terminology. I don't think there's anything overtly wrong with it, but like, in other words, I don't think he's like overtly calling for conflict, but this is not the terminology that I would be using. And so believe me, you do not want a civil war. Nobody wins with a civil war. And what do I mean by that? And I'm just going to insert a little bit of my history into this. So, you know, just 2 years after World War II ended and our soldiers in India came home, a lot of people don't realize there was a lot of Indians that fought in the Second World War, including my grandfather. You know, our soldiers came home to essentially what was a civil war. Now, they call it a partition, and I guess, yeah, technically it is a partition, but, you know, a lot of people died. There was 1 million excess deaths from fighting and conflicts in India as a result of the partition between India and Pakistan. And so here's one example. And I'm not just picking on the Punjabi Hindus. The Muslims were also committing atrocious actions as well. And so there's blood on both sides. But, you know, the very famous one was the 1947 Armstrong Train Massacre. And this, once again, happened on Monday, September 22nd, which was, you know, effectively just 2 years after this, the end of the Second World War. And what happened was people went train car to train car massacring not just men, but also the women and the children. And so there was 3,000 people on this train that were murdered, and then another 1,000 that were injured. And so, you get your country, you get Pakistan, of course, but like, was it worth all the lives that ended? And like, you might think that, okay, yeah, 3,000, it's not a lot. First of all, even more than one excess death is a lot. But like, let me point out something to you guys. So this is just the Wikipedia entry of the partition of India. And notice it says that excess mortality during the period of the partition is usually estimated to be around 1 million people. The violent nature of the partition created an atmosphere of hostility and suspicion between India and Pakistan that affects their relationship to this day. So the point that I'm making is that if you guys are pushing for conflict, now I know I'm not saying anybody is calling for conflict right now. That's not what I'm saying. But if you guys are potentially pushing for it, let's just leave it at that, potentially pushing. If you guys are potentially pushing for it, understand what you're really doing, because not only will you have conflict in the moment, but you will have conflict into perpetuity, because you guys are still going to be landlocked. So just be careful what you're asking for. And the other thing is, the people that you're looking to have conflict with, these are your neighbors. These are people you work with, you live with. You don't want this, right? And so be very careful with the language that you're using, because you're essentially just adding powder to a powder keg that's already ready to explode. Now, House Speaker McCarthy actually vowed an open investigation into the Manhattan District Attorney's office after it was reported a grand jury was preparing to indict former President Donald Trump sometime next week. And so here's what he tweeted. He said, "Here we go again, an outrageous abuse of power by a radical DA who lets violent criminals walk as he pursues political vengeance against President Trump, or former President Trump." McCarthy said in a tweet, "I am directing relevant committees to immediately investigate if federal funds are being used to subvert our democracy by interfering in elections with politically motivated prosecutions." And so I think this shows that the House really can't do anything. I don't really think federal funds are being used in the New York State's investigation. But you guys let me know if I'm missing something, because I might be wrong here. At the end of the day, at the very core of this, I'm a Canadian, right? So I don't really understand the U.S. system as well as I understand our own system. But to be honest, I don't even understand how the province of Ontario shares funding with the federal government here in Canada with respect to using federal funds to support provincial level prosecutions either. And so, there are legal experts. So you guys let me know what you see here. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to use an unbiased newspaper and see if I can get a little bit more information on this. So The Hill is, pretty regarded as an unbiased newspaper by all sides. I mean, if anything, it kind of leans to the left, but most of the respondents to the survey say that it's kind of in the center. And so let's see what they say. So The Hill reported an opinion piece, or they wrote an opinion piece by Jonathan Turley, and he said, "Get ready for Manhattan's DA's made-for-TV Trump prosecution, which will be high on ratings but short on the law." So not a good start for the New York's Attorney General here. And so effectively at the beginning, he says that he might as well, the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg might as well start his unveiling of the indictment of former President Donald Trump by using the same words that they use on America's Got Talent, which would actually kind of be very funny. I'm not going to lie there. And so, the indictment was originally rejected and it has been brought back. And so he did go on to say, that the author of the opinion piece, that the New York case would easily be dismissed outside of a jurisdiction like New York, where Bragg can count on highly motivated judges and jurors. And so, the first thing I think about here is is there political partisanship here? Because shouldn't the law be politically apartisan? You shouldn't have politics injected into the law. Now, we do see that happen. And so this immediately is a red flag. If you want your courts to be respected, you can't do this kind of stuff. And so although it may be politically popular, the case is legally pathetic. And so essentially what he goes on to say is that Bragg is struggling to twist twist state laws to effectively prosecute a federal case long ago rejected by the Justice Department against Trump over his payment of hush money to former stripper Stormy Daniels. And this is something that we all already know about. It feels like this was being reported like back in 2018 or something. Like it was so long ago, 2017, 2018, like so long ago. It's extremely difficult to show that paying money to cover up an embarrassing affair was done for election purposes, as opposed to an array of obvious other reasons, from protecting a celebrity's reputation to preserving a marriage. And yeah, that's a very valid point. And so prosecutors working under Bragg's predecessor, Cyrus Vance Jr., also reportedly rejected the viability of using a New York law to effectively charge a federal offense. So that's a very telling point there. So it's almost just like this new prosecutor has decided that this is important to prosecute, even though the old guys didn't do it. Now, does that mean anything? I don't really know, because different prosecutors have different priorities, and so that's fine. And so the opinion piece author goes on to say, while we still do not know the specific state charges in the anticipated indictment, the most discussed would fall under Section 175 for falsifying business records based on a claim that Trump used legal expenses to conceal the alleged hush payments that were supposedly used to violate federal election laws. And so here's a very interesting point, and it shows a little bit of a bias. And so in the legal experts that are opining on this. So while some legal experts have insisted such concealment is clearly a criminal matter that must be charged, they were conspicuously silent when Hillary Clinton faced a non-dissimilar campaign finance allegation. So that's a very interesting point. I would want to know who these legal experts are and what they actually said about the Hillary Clinton finance campaign allegation. So very interesting point that he made there. And so a Section 175 charge would normally be a misdemeanor. The only way to convert it into a Class E felony requires a showing that the intent to defraud includes an intent to commit another crime or to aid or conceal the commission thereof. And so the other crime would appear to be the federal elections violation, which Justice Department previously declined to charge him on. So again, very interesting that this is something that the Justice Department said, nah, we're not going to do. And so it's interesting that this is brought up. But what this tells me is that I don't think that tensions are going to escalate here, because I think that this case is a nothing burger, really. And that's essentially what this opinion piece author also says. The linkage to a federal offense is critical for another reason. Bragg's office ran out of time to prosecute this as a misdemeanor years ago. The statute of limitations is 2 years. And so it will be a case that is nothing if not entertaining, one which you can bring your popcorn so long as you leave your principles behind. So this calms me down a little bit. I don't think that you're going to have internal conflict or civil conflict between the two parties in America. You know, that was the first thing that I did think of when I saw this. And so I don't think the markets will react. I don't think there will be excess, debts or anything like that. And so that it ultimately ends up being somewhat of a less alarming situation from my perspective. And so, based on myself doing this research, I figured that, there'd be other people that would be interested in this and maybe even potentially concerned. So I would say that although it's not necessarily a complete nothing burger, and I do think people will get riled up by both sides in this situation, I would urge calm. I would urge don't really react on this. And at the end of the day, I say this to my, very left-leaning friends, and I say this to my very right-leaning friends and family, of course, is that, at the end of the day, I don't think we have material significant differences between one another. I think we're more the same people than we are different. And, we work together, we live together, we eat together, we sleep together. And so, hopefully we can find more similarities to move on together. Just like how I urge peace and resolution between, the US and China, I also encourage, just here at home for us to sort of like work together and work through our differences peacefully, democratically, and not resort to sort of like violence or open conflict. And so I'll leave it there, guys. And if you guys have any questions or anything, let me know in the comments below.